Cool, cool. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Pomerium live stream. I can't remember if this is the first or second one after the new year, but anyways, glad to have you here. My name is Nick Taylor. I'm a developer advocate over at Pomerium, and I'm joined by my buddy slash coworker, Dennis, who's in engineering. Dennis, how you doing today?
Hi, Nick. Hi, Nick. Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah.
I'm Dennis. I work on core Pomerium and surrounding products. And today we will talk about MCP.
Yeah.
How it all gets supported in Pomerium Gateway.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we've had. I know there's still some people just discovering MCPs now. I feel like I've been in an MCP bubble because like a lot of people I know are working in the space, but I know a lot of people are just discovering them now, and not just MCPs, but also MCP apps or like ChatGPT apps. So it's we'll definitely go over the updates, but I think it'd be kind of good just a small refresher for people who kind of might know what MCPs are, or maybe somebody's just brand new seeing this. How would you frame what MCPs are, Dennis?
Right. So if we step back and like look at what LLMs are, right? LLMs are just you ask them something and then they produce some text, right? This was the original, and then people added two main things that kind of made it so insanely flexible. First was obviously reasoning, which allowed it to kind of think for a longer time and figure out what to do next. And then there was tool calling. Meaning like you could define some functions, and the model will become extended. Like you can give it a function that will check what the current time of the day is, or it will allow a model to ask some external system a question, right? But you needed to do a kind of plumbing yourself manually in code, and it was kind of tedious. So at some time point, Anthropic came up with MCP, which was supposed to become like a universal plugin interface to the models, and we now see MCP being supported both on the API level of LLMs and also in majority of coding agents, which are inherently becoming general purpose agents as well. And because MCP gives you multiple capabilities, how you can extend your LLM functionality. It's like a next step over the function calling and manual wiring of hooks together with your LLMs.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great explainer. Yeah, and I know for like developers, because like a lot of some people I know, they're like, well, let's just use CLIs or let's maybe use skills perhaps. And like I think the developer world with MCPs is one thing, and then there's the consumer world, so like there's no I can't speak for your mother, but for my mother, there's no way she's ever going to be using CLIs to interact with LLMs. So I think it's good to distinguish it, because like some developers that I know, they're not really using MCPs as much, or they're using them but also with CLIs, and there's advantages to that and stuff. But I think at the consumer level, where we're seeing like ChatGPT apps, or now it's MCP apps, everybody's respecting the standard. This is something that anybody, you don't have to be technical at all. This is like, you can just add it to your ChatGPT or your Claude. So there's still regardless of opinions of developers, there's like a huge market of MCPs for just the general consumer too. So
that's right. That's right. So like a common misconception is that like skills and MCP kind of go sideways. Uh,
yeah.
I think they actually help each other, because skill is a way for the model to do gradual discovery of capabilities,
Hmm.
right? So you may make a skill address a customer complaint, for example, right? Which will talk to your knowledge base through MCP. And like
Hmm.
the if, for example, you're not currently handling the customer complaint, you don't need to know about this like knowledge base, right?
Hmm.
So skills is a way to kind of let the model discover some capabilities, and skills actually can contain the references to the MCPs.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And there's also like for the like I use CLIs a lot too, but like for the people who that some people I know that are devs that are just like I'm just using CLIs and stuff, there's still a very valid use case for MCPs in the context of a developer. This is something Pomerium is really good at, but like I want to access internal resources, so like there's no way you're going to expose that to a CLI that everybody installs on every machine probably. So like having an MCP server that has access to like say your sales database or some other protected resource, it makes a lot of sense to have it encapsulated into this MCP where you can gate the access with Pomerium. And I guess also for people maybe just catching the live stream or not too familiar with Pomerium, we're an identity aware proxy, and I don't know if you want to maybe just touch on that a bit too, Dennis. Just like, why would somebody even use this? Like, I mean, in the context of MCP, but just in general.
Yeah, that's a good question, because why do you need a proxy if you can just do npm install some authentication SDK, wire
Yeah.
it up in a few lines, and then just expose it to the internet? So there are two reasons. First, you generally don't ever want your internal apps being accessible directly from the internet, because
Hmm.
every day there are some day zero vulnerabilities discovered in various frameworks. So you usually do want some kind of fronting gateway. And
Yeah.
Pomerium is a kind of the most conservative type of the gateway you can imagine for your internal applications, because it requires that the user will be authenticated with your in-house identity provider, meaning
Hmm.
it already like reduces it to basically only people you have in your work IDP. And then the next step is that we authorize every request, meaning
Yeah.
we will take a look at what the identity of the user is, maybe any additional data that you connected, like the device posture, like is the user actually coming from the company device, and so on. And then that addition, like, or is it is the user part of the business intelligence team, right? So we can
Hmm.
um, factor in a lot of additional information in order to decide like if the user is supposed to access your application or not. And this
Yeah.
is very different from trying to do this internally in your application, because it may work for you like one application, but like in a reasonable enterprise you will have hundreds and then sometimes thousands of internal applications that were written by
Yeah.
some people and no longer maybe maintained, and maybe people moved on to other teams or even companies. It's much more conservative identity, security posture, to put a
Hmm.
authenticating and authorizing gateway in front of your apps. And previously, a lot of people were able to go away with this by saying like, okay, like it all runs internally in our VPN perimeter, right? But the thing with AI is that you do want frontier models interacting with your internal data, and otherwise you will just not get sufficiently good results. And so Frontier Labs will not establish a VPN connection to your internal VPN, right? So you gotta expose your internal resources somehow to the internet. And now it goes back to like, okay, how do you actually do this? Do you just expose your Python application directly to the internet? So yeah, like this is why gateways such as Pomerium exist, because you need something that is doing one specific function, which is proxying with mandatory authentication and authorization of requests to your internal endpoints from the internet.
Yeah, and I'm paraphrasing a bit what Bobby, who's our CEO, said at one point, but like, you know, because people talk about we're just going to give a guide to best practices and like the devs will implement it. And I think he's a little more conservative in that, like, you know, not conservative, but just like more, I don't know, forceful is not the word, but like by having the gateway, you just remove that, you know, responsibility. It's just like it's taken care of, and it's like you were saying, a uniform security posture. So it's not just MCPs, like it's your whole org potentially, and you're leveraging the same IDP. So it's like, I don't know, I feel like a bias because I work here obviously, but I think, you know, the transition to pull in your IDP and then just get up and running is pretty quick. And yeah, to your point about MCPs with the frontier models and the frontier labs, for sure, you just need access. And like everything you said about how Pomerium works, like with the, you know, device posture and other kinds of policies, you can literally turn the tap on or off for MCPs in that same way. So like common things would be like, you know, you can only access this Monday to Friday. So maybe you just don't want, I don't know, maybe you're just trying to get people to go outside on the weekend. So you just say you could only access the work stuff Monday to Friday. But it's just, yeah, it's nice having those dynamic policies. Yeah. The other thing too is, and like I always joke about this when I talk to people who are building MCPs or I give a talk about it, and it's like you never hear anybody say like, I'm really excited to implement OAuth this weekend for my MCP server. You know, it's like it's something they probably know they have to do at some point, but it's like it's a burden. Not everybody's a security expert as well. So it's like, I think, you know, I dropped a link to our native capabilities with MCP, but another thing is we remove that burden of you having to implement OAuth, which is great. So that's kind of like a developer experience when you can actually just focus on, I'm building an MCP for work. Let me just worry about that. You don't have to worry about auth N, auth Z. Sure, you might have some application specific stuff maybe in your resources, but it's really nice that you don't have to implement any of that. It's like a bit of config, and that's about it on the route. So I think even if you don't care about zero trust or identity aware proxies, just as a dev, like that's like a huge developer experience win for me. But
yeah, OAuth has a lot of like sharp edges, and especially if you have like modern, like it's also about maintenance, because MCP also is still a moving target. It's not like 1.0 with there are still breaking changes introduced and that you will have to react to. And with MCP there are some interesting dynamic, is that like you are supposed to be able to very frequently change the implementation, because it's not really an API, like which had to be firmly set, thought over, and preferably never updated in a breaking way. With MCP, you can continuously iterate like on your server, and this is probably where you would want to spend your time on, rather than wiring, doing the OAuth plumbing, and making sure that it all works correctly with across different clients. Because also the reality is that there are several already. We have like 3 major revisions of the MCP protocols, and there are varying capabilities of the clients, and there is quite a bit of complexity, I think, and I think the community has been like a little frustrated with the fact that there is some churn, and there is some complexity to absorb for you as a developer. So we try to take as much as possible of this authentication and authorization complexity away from the developers, so that you can just work on your business logic.
Yeah. No, I think that's really great, and that's a good segue to just to talk about. So I dropped a link to the current spec. I think the last one was from November 25th, 2025. So you've been working a lot on making the updates to the spec, and I guess like maybe go over high level. We don't need to go literally through every PR, obviously, but I guess like what are some of the notable things that if you were to use Pomerium, out of the box, what do you get with these spec updates?
Yeah, the main thing is that you don't need to think about them.
Yeah,
because
so that's good.
because for example, it started with like MCP is a stateful protocol, right? So like it requires, like, we can take the client registration, right? It changed it already. Like it started with dynamic client registration, because like in older times you would go to some console of your tool and create an OAuth client and get a secret and the client ID, and you will wire it with your application. So because you don't know which MCP client will be talking to you, so like there was a DCR, the dynamic client registration protocol, introduced it in our original version of the MCP for HTTP. And then it's already phased out in favor of CIMD, which is when you host like a document on your server, and on your client, and then the server is able to check like who is it talking to. So as an MCP developer, you probably don't want to kind of follow those kind of updates, because again, you would want to spend your time writing some business logic, and not this kind of plumbing.
And like for CIMD, I believe that's client ID metadata. Metadata doc. I dropped a link to it. And this like you said, it replaces dynamic client registration, which was a little more cumbersome from I don't think I ever really touched it.
Yeah, because the problem was that like it was too open, I think, and this is why they deprecated it. Because it effectively introduced like an unbounded right to your like registry of the clients. The CIMD is also not perfect because it introduces a different problem when your server will have to go back and fetch something, so an unknown client may make your server go and make a request to some place. And that kind of opens you to some relay attacks. And again, you need to think about it, and you need to because you don't want your MCP host to be an amplifier for some attack, for example.
Yeah.
So these are like those kind of small things you will probably never think about as an application developer, but
Yeah.
they can kind of bite you. And this is why, in general, I think it is recommended to use some kind of gateway in the front of your application where those concerns could be addressed in a
Yeah.
central manner across all your applications.
Yeah, and this is something that like people who work security at a company are probably a fan of, you know, when they know there's like one one place where it's all gated, that's a win for them. But yeah, I guess in regards to the CIMD, I'll just make it more tangible for people who might not have absorbed all that. In a nutshell, what it means is I create an MCP server or an MCP app, which is still a server, but uh, what the CIMD does is like for in the case of Pomerium, we would define these in Pomerium. And so what you can do is you can actually gate where the MCP server could be used. So for example, VS Code has a CIMD. So like if you added that, if you sent that when your MCP server tries to connect to VS Code, you're basically telling it, I'm allowing VS Code to work with my MCP server. But if that's the only one I had defined and then I went to ChatGPT, it's actually gonna give an error or reject it. So this is something that, you know, one, it makes it easier to, I guess, vet which clients. So, and when we mean clients, we mean MCP clients. So that's something like GitHub Copilot and VS Code, ChatGPT or Claude.ai or Goose, etc. So this is actually really good from an organizational standpoint because maybe those internal resources, you don't want them going to ChatGPT. Maybe you only want them going to Claude, or maybe you only want them using it in VS Code for some reason. So you can actually, along with the existing dynamic authorization policies that Pomerium provides, this layer from the MCP spec, you know, adds another layer if it's something you want to opt into. So
Yeah, this is what may be called like shadow IT because
mhm.
yeah, like all those AI tools, they introduce a problem that people may use some kind of a client and not realize that this client is actually backed by some LLM, and meaning this LLM is hosted somewhere by
Mhm.
some company, and your organization may not have any contract with this company, right? And so it is important to be able to define which clients are able to connect to your MCP servers because you don't want you don't want random tools infiltrating your data, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And who knows, maybe you make some MCP client yourself at your organization, and it's you know, it's secured by Pomerium on the internet somewhere. You could actually have a CIMD for your specific MCP client that you built as well. So you could even have it so like these MCP servers that we're giving our employees or customers, they can only use it on our MCP clients. So like I don't think too many people are creating MCP clients right now that I'm aware of, but that is another potential thing you could do with it.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before on other live streams, you and me, but so we get OAuth out of the box when you're gating your MCPs with Pomerium, but it's not just that first level of OAuth, which is like, for all intents and purposes, it's, I find it always confusing because the OAuth actually does a login too, but that's because of OIDC. But regardless, you get that first level of like, okay, my MCP is secured, I can decide who has access to it. But you might have an upstream service too. And I can share a link to this if we want to talk through this. Let me just go ahead and get that link real quick. But yeah, I guess if you just want to talk about like upstreams in Pomerium for OAuth, Dennis, and I'll just get that screen loaded up.
Yeah. So upstreams, Upstreams are interesting because when MCP started, it started as a stdio tools, right?
Yeah.
Like local, running with something that you have an access with,
Mhm.
access to directly, and
Yeah.
then the HTTP mode was introduced, and what HTTP mode gives you is like a centralized management. For example, if your MCP server under the hood needs some sensitive token, right? Then
Yeah.
you don't need to distribute this sensitive token to your users. Instead, you may host your um, MCP server in some central manner, and for people in your organization just access this centralized URL, and then they authenticate with your IDP, and then you can check like if they're a member of required groups, and this is where you can provide them with the access.
Yeah.
That was like a first level, but then also there was the complexity of what if there is no like single token that your MCP server has to use, but what if it's something like Google Drive or like any
Mhm.
other like OAuth compliant client? Then you need to implement all this dance with the third party provider, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
we added this little non-standard mode where you can just delegate the acquisition of OAuth tokens with a classic OAuth 2 clients, and Pomerium will just do all the token refresh for you and everything, and you will just always receive the up to date. Your MCP server will always receive the latest and greatest access token that you can use to talk to your remote APIs.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that we are working on currently is a kind of a bridge mode. So like if you have an MCP server that is directly provided by your SaaS that you use, right?
Yeah.
How can you you don't have control over that MCP,
Yeah. So for example, the hosted linear MCP server.
right? Linear is a good example. You don't have control over what functionality linear exposes, and as we know, YOLO is actually so tempting, right? Because
Oh yeah.
the agentic loops are becoming so good that like the probability of any like coding agent to achieve the goal of doing either research, like maybe you're doing some bug research, maybe something. So like what if, for example, you want to make an agent that
Mhm.
runs some coding agent, like takes a linear ticket, right? And then it runs a coding agent, and then just goes back to you with a result, right? Um, it entails like you basically need to run somehow to authenticate to the linear, right? And
Yeah.
then in your coding agent, you want it to be able to access linear, but you don't want it to have access to all the functionality of the linear. You only want it to be able to read the contents of the ticket,
Mhm.
and then just go about exploring the code base, for example. And obviously, you need to put it into the sandbox and like prevent a lot of other things from happening.
Yeah.
Uh, but currently, there is no good answer to how can you limit it to only talking to maybe a very small subset of MCP tools
Yeah.
that are coming from the external server. So this is what Pomerium Bridge mode allow you, because you would be able to talk to remote hosted MCP servers, and you would be able to have a kind of pinned authentication that you can pin to a Pomerium service account, and then you
Okay.
would be able to retain this ongoing authentication for a completely offline agent that is like running, no longer running on your laptop, but maybe it's running as a cron job, or maybe it's responding to some requests. And you would be able to limit the set of tools that the coding agent is able to call from each hosted MCP server.
Yeah.
And yeah, that will allow you to like put your agent into a properly insulated sandbox, and then use Pomerium as a kind of uh, egress limiting and to your remote MCP servers.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and this is like, I guess to kind of distill it, so like if I'm using linear, like if I'm in the application, I have certain things I'm allowed to do. Like I can obviously in linear, I can create tickets, I can edit them, I can delete them or change the status. So to your point about like once it's bridged, like even though I can do all those things like as a human in the loop, or it's not even human in the loop, just human doing it, we organizations just might not want, for whatever reason, in an agentic flow for me to be able to delete the tickets, because that's not how they want me to leverage their MCP server capabilities. So we can restrict it, like you were saying, with those dynamic authorization policies. So like, even though, because I've given this demo before, I forked the GitHub local. It was like a standard IO MCP server. I converted it to streamable HTTP, but I basically use that as an example. Like it's not bridge, but the idea was kind of showing what a bridge could do. So I was able to say, like, you can go ahead and create pull requests. You can do all these things for the coarse grained repo static scope, OAuth scope. But for whatever reason, the org has decided you're not allowed to merge the pull request in an agentic flow. They want you to just go to GitHub and do that. So, and this is another thing I forgot, but I just thought of it when I said it. So like OAuth scopes, are static. So like you're given a certain set of scopes when you have, like if you were to use the MCP server and these OAuth scopes are defined, they're static in the sense that like the only way they can change is if you redeploy and update those. And that's kind of rigid. And GitHub is a good example because the repo OAuth scope, it basically allows you to do anything for a repository that you have access to. And in the case of GitHub, I don't think that's going to get any more coarse grained, probably, or fine grained, sorry. But other companies might say, oh, we'll just create 1,000 OAuth scopes then. But then you're giving all those OAuth scopes still, whereas with Pomerium, we could just say, oh, you can do this right now, or no, not during this time frame, or you know what, you can have access to everything. So it's like, I think it also complements static OAuth scopes in a really positive way, where people can actually become more fine grained, because the GitHub MCP server is a perfect example, because it's going to give you all the repo tools. So you just restrict certain repository tools. So I think that's pretty powerful. And I honestly don't think I've seen anybody else do this yet or talk about it. So I think we're kind of unique in that perspective.
Yeah, it's yeah. So like GitHub, for example, has a very very fine grained permissions, I think, which is
Yeah.
not very common across SaaSes in general. Like with SaaSes, you may have significantly less permissions, which is why I think, ability to limit the specific MCP tools that the agent is able to invoke is kind of important, and
Yeah.
not just for the security purpose, but because the reasoning loops of coding agents sometimes take unexpected turns, and like even if you crafted your prompt well and said like, I want you only to research things and this is the ticket I want you to
Yeah.
investigate, it sometimes may see a tempting turn to like, oh, and by the way, I will fix this, and now I can close the ticket, and like, great, I'm a good agent, because like ultimately they're all RL trained to be a helpful agent, and they think like, oh, like I can go above and beyond, let's do this. And
Yeah. Make
yeah,
no mistakes.
right, and it's hard to say when this will happen, but I think everybody who worked with agents saw it this more than once, that sometimes they do unpredictable things, and
Mhm.
this is why like overall the sandboxing on both like runtime environment level and on network egress level is possible, and to large extent the only valid uh, egress path for an agent is MCP. So this is why we
Mhm.
are working on enabling you to put Pomerium between your agent, like general purpose agent that talks to the outside world through MCP, and your remote MCP servers,
Yeah.
so that you can define fine-grained policies with regards to what the agent can do with the
Yeah. No, for sure.
external.
And it's not only great for, like, obviously we have some large organizations using Pomerium, and it's serving them really well, but I like it's a great home lab use case too. And like I mean, part of like when I started at Pomerium, I came more from just being an app dev, so like more infra and security was a little out of my wheelhouse to some degree. So I've been slowly learning it by home lab, and there's a lot of people that use Pomerium in a home lab context too. And like I even have my own MCPs running off my own home lab, and I don't have, like we were saying before, I don't have to worry about OAuth or anything. It's just I just create a route, I set it to MCP route, and then we're good to go. So it's not just for the enterprise use case, if people are wondering. And I guess the other thing too is, like, I know you're still working on the bridge support, but once that goes live, that also enables some other things, like um, you could potentially filter out PII coming in, but also coming out. Like will with the bridge, you'll be able to filter what goes in and what comes out potentially, if you wanted to do something like that. And I think that's pretty powerful, because a lot of people are talking about guardrails, prompt injection, and stuff. And I think the bridge implementation we have here will allow you to put some of those guardrails in, which I think is pretty cool too.
Yeah. So that's another thing that you need to be wary of, that little trifecta is real. So you need to make sure you don't expose your, especially like autonomously working agent, to a
Mhm.
combination of like un untrusted input from the internet and a combination of like internal tools, because this is not something that will
Yeah.
end up well. and and this is by the way something you can control, you would be able to control with Pomerium as an egress gateway, because you know the enumeration of the tools that the like agent is trying to access, and the agent carries a certain identity, so you can like craft policies that will disallow the intermixing of like web search and like internal tools. So like if you're
Yeah.
if you have an agent whose job is to do some kind of deep research, they should not be able to call your MCP token to your QuickBooks, for example, or something
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
And you can express this as a policies.
Yeah. No, that's super cool. I know we're getting close to time here, but I think it'd be worth. I can maybe demo this. So we've been working on. So I guess, well, a few things. One, people are still exploring MCPs. I know there's a bunch of people in some of the communities I'm a part of. They're only just discovering MCPs now because like there's just so much going on in tech. But you know, getting started. So like we've talked about all these benefits that Pomerium can give you, but uh, one thing I've noticed, I don't have numbers on this, but it's just general observations having spoken to people who are just building is, like a lot of other things like performance or accessibility, people kind of put security to the wayside because they're just like, I just want to build something cool. And, then it gets to that point where, maybe your manager's like, oh, that's amazing. Let's put it in production. And it's like, well, it's not secured yet. This was just like me having fun, try to build something. So, uh, we've been working on something to allow you to have like secure MCP servers from day one, including the development environment. And it's a hosted service we have. I don't know if you want to just maybe briefly talk about that, and I can kind of just set up the demo if you want.
Yeah, so like if you want to connect your your server running on your laptop that you're developing, and
Yeah,
you're already maybe wired it to your corporate resources, right? So you need to somehow to give it an access to no, vice versa. Like you need like things like ChatGPT or Claude to be able to access your running instance,
hmm,
and that entails that you need to have a tunnel. The tunnel has to be HTTPS with a real browser trusted certificate, so it cannot be self-signed.
yeah,
Um, and then third thing is that, well, there are some tunnels that are available, and you can try to convince yourself that nobody will guess the URL of your route. But a much more conservative position is to have the tunnel actually requiring authentication.
yeah,
So this is what we do, and we also do this completely following the MCP protocol,
yeah,
because you cannot generally connect a route that will just show like, oh, sign in with something, right?
yeah,
uh, because the LLM will not understand it, because LLM wants to talk MCP protocol to your route. It
yeah,
doesn't know it's a tunnel or something. Yeah, so this was where we made either a hosted offering that is free for you to use, or you can just install a Pomerium instance in your environment and just let your developers use a shared tunneling jump host.
yeah. Okay, cool. I'm gonna go just ahead and share my screen here. So, and to your point, yeah. So I think the path to least resistance is just using the hosted one. If you're like just want to build an MCP server, maybe this isn't for work, or even if it is for work, this is just a really good way to just get up and running. But to Dennis's point, it's actually kind of nice if you're in an organization, you can have your own like tunneling service that all your developers can use. And I think this is important to note because I was talking to a friend of mine who does a lot of work with MCPs, and his work explicitly told him you can't use ngrok. They don't want their traffic going through ngrok. So if you own the tunnel, then I think your security team or your managers are probably a little happier, you know? So there's that too, just wanted to mention. But yeah, so I've got my terminal open here, and the command is pretty easy. It's just SSH. So to be clear here, there's no additional software. I'm on Mac OS right now, but you could be on Windows, Linux, whatever the native SSH client is, that's what you use. So there's, just to be clear, no additional software. So I'm just going to do a reverse tunnel, and I'm going to call the server pom.run. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And first thing you're going to notice is, and this is something we have with our native SSH as well, but I need to go through this login. So I'm actually going to go through Pomerium. So I'm going to click on this, and of course it's going to bring it onto another screen, but I'm already logged in, but I'm going to authorize that I can access this. And now I'm going to be logged in. So let me just move this back over here. And you're going to see we have this TUI, this terminal user interface. Got a bit of a revamp. I think it looks really great. Side note, but you can see some information here. It's showing who's logged in. This is me with my work account. And you can see there's this remote URL here, this gentle ghoul. It's, you know, like a lot of services, just gives a funny subdomain name. But I guess, I don't know if you want to speak to this a bit, Dennis, but like essentially I've got my remote here, which is the Pomerium from route, and then I've got localhost here. And I don't know if you want to maybe explain how that works briefly, and I can load up the web server.
Yeah, so basically this is what you see on your screen, that the route, which is HTTPS MCP dot yada yada yada, is being tunneled to your localhost port 8080.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, so let's come back here. Let me just get this off the screen. I'll just put it on another screen. All right, cool. Okay, so I'm just cutting a few steps here, but I just came into my ChatGPT settings. There's a section called apps. It used to be called connectors, I believe, but apps, it's called apps now because there are ChatGPT apps. So there's applications that don't necessarily just have to be MCP servers that provide text. They can also provide a user interface. So I've got some here installed, like Linear. That's just a textual one, but we have a ChatGPT template to get you up and running. So I'm gonna just open this here, and I'm already connected, but I'm just gonna show you here. You're gonna see that there's the URL that was in the TUI for the tunneling. And you can see here it's using OAuth, and then I've got some metadata about it, so you can, I can provide some links for this, but basically the MCP app or ChatGPT apps have a different protocol here called UI://. And so what this gives you is, you know, like currently, if you ask an MCP server or something, it's going to give you a textual response. I have this echo one, and I'm going to just say hello. Now, this is just a starter template, so all it does is echo what you did. So I'm just going to go ahead and click enter. And while that's working, I'm just going to bring you back here. You should see, hopefully it's starting. Is it connected? Yeah, okay. It should open and close some connections, I believe. Okay, so it must have closed the connections really quickly. So we got this echo, I just said echo hello. So we can see it here. Now the difference here is obviously there's some UI here. So this is part of our template. So it's got theming, so you can do light mode or dark mode. You can call a tool from within the UI. So I'm just going to re-echo the same thing. And then it's going to say here, just re-echoing hello. You can go to full screen. And these are all things that are supported in the MCP app spec as well as ChatGPT. And yeah, so this is just kind of neat. And I guess the main thing I want to drive home here is all we did was we ran ssh-r0pom.run. I cloned the repo, and all I did here was I just did npm run dev after installing. And then I was able to add it to my settings here. So I just came to settings, apps, and then I added, I created the app here, added it. And then within, like, let's say to be conservative, let's just say a few minutes, and I'm up and running with a full-blown MCP app that I can start actually building off of. So I think it's really cool what the pom.run unlocks, but I also think it's pretty neat too that let me just go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. I think it's just a really nice way to get up and running, because like kind of what we were saying before, or maybe I was saying it, but like you might not even care about zero trust or identity aware proxies or anything right now. I think it's something good to read up on for sure eventually, but this is just a really elegant way to just get started super quickly with an MCP app, or it could be an MCP server only. You've got authentication and authorization out of the box. It's a really nice flow. There's no additional software, and I also like the fact, I haven't done this yet, but I'm going to set up my own tunnel on my home lab, because I think that'll be super useful. And that's not just for orgs too. If you happen to self-host Pomerium, you can also set up the tunneling too. So
right,
yeah.
and like developing the MCP UI apps, or like ChatGPT apps, or it has this unique challenge that you need to have it connected to a real ChatGPT, and
Yeah.
like the issue there could be that if you're like on a business plan, not on a personal
Mhm.
plan, only organizational admins are able to add and remove applications.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's a big surprise to
Yeah, I find
me,
that a little
because
odd.
as a dev, there is no sandbox for you. Like you cannot do anything, which is kind of understandable, because it's something that has a potential of tying your like company managed LLM account with something external, right? So
Yeah.
this is where Pomerium can also help, because if you're running a gateway yourself in your organization, you can or you use Pomerium Zero, which Pomrun uses under the hood. um, you are able to provide your team with a set of routes that, like, it could be not just MCP dot something, but it can be actually like something like nick dot MCP dot corp dot
Yeah.
com, and every member will get their own tunnel, and then admins will add those tunnels to say ChatGPT team plan, and
Yeah.
you would have your stable like work environment, which is
Yeah.
again protected from unauthorized use from outside of the internet. And then there
Yeah.
is this trust chain between your enterprise account in the ChatGPT and your tunneling, which is also only could be accessed through like SSH, and we have additional controls to make
Yeah.
sure that you are only accessing it from your company laptop. So like you can establish like a pretty solid chain of trust
Yeah.
between the LLM and your development server.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing about that is the organization gets all the security goodness that they're looking for, and there's no friction for the developer, because they're like, here's your environment, and not only that, like you can obviously redeploy different MCPs as you're building different things. You just use the same Pomerium from route URL, and that's also good, I think, from the organization standpoint, because we obviously, one thing we didn't mention, but like Pomerium, the identity aware proxy, Pomerium in general audits everything that goes through it. So you get OTel traces and stuff. So you could know like, okay, this is all of Nick's traffic, and this is what he's been working on. Like, so you could segregate it from the different routes, I guess, to some degree. So that's pretty neat too.
Yeah, we do MCP protocol inspection, and we know what is being called and what is being sent.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's somebody in the chat. Jehovah says net worth, you can rebuild it from scratch into whatever you need it to do. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, I think that's I think this solves a lot of issues. It solves like some shadow AI, shadow IT issues within an org potentially. It removes friction for a developer to be able to actually build the thing out, and then the org gets those nice security things in place so that they're happy on their end too. So obviously biased, but I've been finding the pom.run really solid. I'm actually looking forward to, when I have some time, I'm going to definitely set that up in my home lab, because that's the other thing. It's not so much related to MCPs, but with a home lab, like, I don't know, I'm lucky in my respect. For whatever reason, my ISP lets me open ports, or if they don't, they just don't care. I don't know. And this was something I was oblivious to. I thought everybody could do that, but I remember talking to yourself or like one of our other coworkers, and they're like, "No, we can't do that." And so with the tunneling, it's port 22 is a pretty standard port that's open. So like it avoids all these NAT issues that you might have run into if you were trying to run something like the home lab without doing some, I guess, weird workarounds to get like access to it. So there's definitely that too, which we didn't really talk about because it was a little less relevant to MCPs, but yeah, cool. Well, we're pretty much at time, Dennis. So I think this is a good place to wrap up. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just drop the link for if anybody's interested in checking out the offering from Pomerium for MCPs. There's a short link here you can go to. If you have any questions, definitely drop issues in or discussions in the GitHub repos. Pomerium is open core, so you can access that in GitHub. And yeah, just curious what you're building. Just reach out. You can hit me up anywhere online. I'm Nicky T online, or just tag Pomerium_IO, and happy to answer questions or see what you're getting up to. And yeah, excited to see what people build. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody. Just one note, on Monday, I'm going to be hanging out with Rachel Lee Neighbors. She's done a lot of work in the web space. She used to work on the React core team. She's worked at places like Amazon and so on. She's doing some work, I think, with Google right now. We're going to be talking about web MCP on Monday, which is related to MCPs. So if you're curious about that, tune in. That's going to be 10 a.m. Eastern. She's in London. Sorry, they're in London. So the time's gonna be a little earlier, but definitely encourage you to check that out. I'm positive it's gonna be a really interesting stream. So, okay, well, take care, everybody.